X-Men number 20 is a massive moment in the Jonathan Hickman era of X-Men, paying off so much of the run since House and Powers of 10 in the penultimate issue of Hickman's time writing this incarnation of the X-Men title. The cover makes it clear that we're looking at the possible return of the mutant-hunting adaptive sentinel Nimrod, but there's much more to the story and promises of what's to come. Simply put, I'm over the moon excited about what's in store for all of us X-fans after this comic. Today I'll answer: what ramifications does Nimrod have on this era of X-Men? What has Moira McTaggart been reading in her secret lair, and what are the implications? Is this the end of Moira's 10th life? What is Jonathan Hickman's next book? And theories and predictions for what's to come in this exciting era of X-Men. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You are listening to Krakin Krakoa number 184. If you like the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting here. It all helps me out a great deal and continues to encourage me to make videos like this. You can find full X-Men and comic book reading orders on comicbookherald.com, including a full guide for the Reign of X, spoilers for discussed comics, and what's to come may follow. Writer Jonathan Hickman, artist Francesco, Mobili, colors Sonny Gal, letters by Clayton Cowles. More than a year after X-Men number 6 dealt with Mystique's involvement on Orchis, the mystery of what she was doing in House of X, actually planting a Krakoan gate in the Orchis facility so that the mutants could infiltrate their human rivals. She's back. We're finally revisiting the story, and as Mystique says here, I have annihilation on my mind. She hits up Forge for a weapon that will do the most damage possible to Orchis, to the Orchis facility, or so Forge is led to believe, right? He tells her, of course, that a weapon of this magnitude would have to be for some off-world action. Mystique and Forge do have some history together. If you go back to the Uncanny X-Men era, mid-80s, you would see Forge actually joining up with Freedom Force for a time, which is the team that Mystique was on with Destiny, with Blob, with Pyro, Avalanche, and the like. They were actually together on the mission where Destiny, Irene Adler, Mystique's wife and love, actually died at the hands of a Shadow King-possessed legion on Muir Island, Moira's Muir Island, no less. Now, Forge here, again, he references some more Uncanny X-Men history as well as they discuss making this weapon that could destroy the Orchis facility. He references the history telling Mystique the worst weapon he ever made in his life was a gun that turns us into them. This is actually something that Forge invented, again, during this time period, mid-80s, Uncanny X-Men, written by Chris Claremont, invented, a mutant cure of sorts, right? A depowering weapon that was intended to be used on Rogue by Freedom Force and the government, but actually hit Storm instead, and that's where we get a depowered Storm with the sweet Mohawk for a good chunk of 80s X-Men. Now, Storm is actually very much without her powers even while she's leading the X-Men. But nonetheless, Mystique gets her weapon. She gets a singularity generator, basically a massive bomb that would destroy the Orchis facility. Professor X tells her here as they discuss, the power of this weapon. And I do want to say, too, this singularity weapon, it definitely, Mystique describing it as a miniature black hole immediately had me thinking about Rasputin and Moira's lifelines and Powers of 10. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go. There's a lot of callbacks here, okay? X-Men 20 might be the, there might be the most callbacks per page of anything in the Hickman era, frankly. Just the way this calls back to things that happen in House of X, things that happen in Powers of 10. It's definitely helps to, run through the Krakin Krakoa videos like I did. Krakin Krakoa number 50, I think it was a House of X and Powers of 10 reread. And definitely a video like that, I think, is going to help out a good deal here. Or, of course, actually rereading the event that kicked it all off yourself, which is a lot of fun. But there are a ton of callbacks about potential, and we'll dig into that a little bit. Now, Professor X here, he says to Mystique, as she talks about, how she's going to blow up Orchis, in the end, the only thing that matters is preventing Nimrod from coming online. This singularity of vision, this ends justify the means. They are talking about blowing up an entire Orchis facility full of human beings, right? The old Professor X, the dream of coexistence, certainly would not have gone for this. This is Moira's reach, right? This is the radicalization of Professor X, of Magneto to a significantly lesser extent. He looks pretty gleeful here because murder is what he does, as he told us in Sword. But for Professor X, this is Moira's reach, right? She radicalized him, saying, we always lose. Mutants always lose. Here's all these futures. He is so far gone, so far pragmatic. Essentially, he is absolutely on board with this, right? It's the only thing that matters. And I think that's not surprising in this era, but it really hammers home the point, okay? I think artistically, too, this issue, X-Men number 20, This is Francesco Mobili's first issue on X-Men so far, and I think he does an increasingly solid job, especially as we progress to actually seeing Nimrod. But it definitely felt a little bit like X-Men number 6 light. It felt a little bit like we're kind of getting to the point of quality. It is interesting to me, and this is a conversation for another time, perhaps on the casual Krakoa, where I do answer some listener questions that I'll be doing at the end of the day of this comic's release, May 26th, here live on the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel. But Hickman kind of has a hard time staying with artists at the Marvel level, right? Like it kind of has a hard time sticking with like the same artist across his runs, to a degree. I think, if we're looking at Avengers and now X-Men, it is interesting why that might be. Okay, now, on the Orcs facility, Dr. Alia Gregor is trying to restore her husband Erasmus to life through Nimrod, actually. Okay, Erasmus sacrificed himself in House of X number 4 and I think into number 5, blowing up a bunch of the X-Men and killing them on that mission where they tried to destroy the Mother Mold that they thought would bring a Nimrod online. Well, it turns out basically the X-Men's actions, they have brought Nimrod to life unintentionally, right? So as Leah Gregor says, so we've gathered here to witness the resurrection of my husband. So not only is she bringing a Nimrod online using Erasmus's consciousness, essentially, but we're also getting now a mirror of resurrection. We're getting a mirror of Krakoan resurrection protocols through a man-machine evolution. There's a fair amount of mirrored personality, too, between this Nimrod and what we see in Powers of 10. Again, all these callbacks to Moira's previous lifelines. The use of Nimrod in this issue saying, I'm so sorry for what I'm about to do, this is dialogue replicated by the, significantly more murderous yet kind of just goofy fun in some ways Nimrod version from Powers of 10. Plus, too, the use of the singularity of Mystiques is what we see Zorn and Rasputin use in Powers of 10, right? The evolution of man-machine hybrids that I mentioned. There's just so much connective tissue going on, and I'm definitely not ruling out, and I don't know how much in detail I'll go here. We've got multiple singularities used. We've got multiple black holes exploded essentially through lifelines. Could the Erasmus Nimrod, could Rasputin and Zorn, could they be in some sort of realm together through the various singularities that they've traveled? Do I know how black holes work? Of course not. But science fiction-wise, there's maybe potential there for these characters to connect, again, because certain characters like a Rasputin from the Powers of 10 timeline, too cool not to use again. Now, why? There's a plot question here that I have, a big one, frankly. Mystique's plan here is to get this singularity bomb, to go to the Orcs facility, and to blow them all up to stop Nimrod, right? To stop them as a threat to mutant kind. In doing so, the promise, the deal that she's made with Professor X and Magneto is that if she does this and is successful, they will resurrect Destiny. They might be lying liars who lie. That is actually very probable, I would say. I don't know how they would talk their way out of that one, but they probably would lie. But nonetheless, that is the deal. So why does Mystique bother watching the Nimrod come fully online? Sits through the ceremony of Alia Gregor succeeding in bringing the Nimrod online. Mystique gets caught in what is a very funny moment. There's all this emotion and humanity of bringing the Erasmus, the Erasmus maybe, Nimrod online. And in this funny moment of, this emotional beat being undercut by that's a mutant, but also, why is Mystique sitting there for that? It's really strange. It gives us the drama and the humanity of Nimrod's resurrection, but strategically, it doesn't make any sense. Now, there's two options here that I'm considering. One, it's just convenient for the plot, right? At the end of the day, Occam's razor, the simplest solution might be the most accurate one, and it might just be, yeah, it's kind of convenient. we need this to go wrong. Or alternate number 2, which I prefer. It's a little more strategic. Mystique is plotting something else. Okay, remember too, in X-Men number 6, Mystique had the chance to destroy Nimrod by, she's literally standing over Alia Gregor's body with a knife, and she doesn't strike. She didn't kill her, to hold some leverage to get Destiny back, okay? But then seemingly throughout this issue, she's still playing Professor X and Magneto's games to get her wife resurrected. Seemingly, and she has two options that Destiny has told her. Basically, it's bring me back, get me resurrected, and Destiny tells her this years before Krakoa, or burn it to the ground. Okay, those are her options. So it seems like in this issue, she's still playing the bring me back game. Or is she? Okay, or could Mystique have hidden a second singularity? Could she have had Forge make her two weapons? She only tells Professor X and Magneto about one, and she actually hides one somewhere here on the base so that she maintains her leverage. I prefer this version of events because it means Mystique has more planning and less just like huge strategic blind spots. I don't get why she would sit there with the bomb and wait to allow them to stop her, basically. So Erasmus sacrifices, the humanity, the part of himself resurrected in the Nimrod in order to stop the singularity from engulfing the Orchis station, okay? And Mystique and Professor X and Magneto, their actions have only served to ensure the creation of a mutant-hunting Nimrod. Again, I've talked about this a bunch, but the preventative actions the mutant kind takes in Hickman's X-Men run and in this era of X-Men, they consistently fail, and they consistently lead to the very thing mutant kind was trying to prevent. Here we get Nimrod the Hunter without the human consciousness of Erasmus because of Mystique's action, right? So it's like these actions they take, they actually drive to the future, the inevitability, right? The we always lose of it all that they were trying to avoid. So Mystique fails, and she's killed by Nimrod before being blasted back through the Krakoan gate. Now, there's an interesting conversation in the aftermath of this on Orchis where Karima Shapinder, Omega Sentinel, and Director Devo, who we still know precious little about, are assessing the damage, or in this case, the almost total lack thereof to the Orchis headquarters. Mystique's plan does virtually nothing. Now, Dr. Alia Gregor is emotionally devastated. Basically, she just watched her husband sacrifice himself to save humanity twice, right, from their point of view. But otherwise, the mutant plot, seemingly totally backfired, unless we buy into my second singularity theory, which there's no evidence of. So we get a great line here from Devo. They don't just hate us, they fear us. It's a really smart, I think, inversion of the standard X-Men tagline of mutants protecting a world that fears and hates them. I've talked plenty about why I don't think the X-Men are quote-unquote the villains now, and I'm not going to fully relitigate it here, but there is a budding argument from Hickman, potentially, that is opposed to the cold, calculating pragmatism of Professor X and Magneto, at least as a leadership strategy, right? And those are different things. It's not acknowledging that the pragmatism of the nation over everything is deeply flawed and can lead to a lack of humanity is not the same thing as saying the X-Men or the mutant kind moving to Krakoa and carving out a space for themselves in a world that has always subjugated and been prejudiced against them. It's not saying that that's wrong, right? Those are two separate things. But seeing Devo, again, like it's that thing of a totalitarian leader viewing themselves as the victim, right? This is a strategy we see time and time again in political atmospheres, and you see Devo saying this exact thing, and I think here too, like, he's not wrong. Like, Professor X, Magneto, Moira McTaggart to a degree, they're acting scared. They're acting scared of Orchis, and they're acting scared of Nimrod, and it shows in their actions. Now, Professor and Magneto, they're bothered, obviously, but they aren't like, oh, game over, right? They aren't like, okay, Nimrod's online, that failed, we have no options now, which is interesting. Instead, they determine that certain plans simply need to be activated as quickly as possible. So they have a strategy here, which I do love. This is great. This is the level of planning I'm looking for based on their involvement with Moira, right? There should be tiers of plans and strategies and contingencies and escape hatches based on what happens. If Nimrod becomes active, what do they do? I mean, you have to think too, like, when you think about it, based on what we've seen in X-Men number 6 and now in X-Men number 20, Professor X and Magneto putting the entirety of their hopes on destroying this, bringing, this Nimrod activation on Mystique, pretty wild. Like, they clearly don't trust her. They don't have faith in her. As they talk to her, they don't really necessarily think she'll succeed. Kind of a weird decision, ultimately. Like, there are other options that they could have taken to try to destroy this facility to bring it down. So we see Magneto here say, in short terms, it clarifies our plans. We'll need Tull, okay, and he gets cut off. Now, this will be the subject of much debate and much hypothesis, I am certain. The first things that came to mind, well, first off, like, like Occam's razor here is Professor X and Magneto talking about what's likely to come out of the Hellfire Gala, which I've talked about a lot on Krakin Krakoa here, which is, the X-Men setting their sights towards the stars, of them establishing more galactic presence, and, probably the thing that everybody's talking about, like, establishing some sort of base on Mars, if not beyond. Okay, so, like, that plan is probably potentially what they're referring to, but it could be something new. It could be something different. And the only thing that I could think of that starts with TOL, again, like not uppercase, not a pronoun, would be something to do with tolerance, okay? Tolerance protocols, something like that. This could potentially bring to mind a 90s X-Men crossover, Operation Zero Tolerance, which deals with Bastion, who is, this kind of somewhat complicated, I won't totally explain it here, but a version of an evolved Nimrod to a degree, right? So Operation Zero Tolerance, that storyline, could the tolerance protocols for mutant kind be something like mutant kind, fully taking their leverage over worldwide governments, over humanity, cut off Orcus funding, those sorts of things to say, like, let's put these restrictions on Orcus in place because clearly they have evolved too far, so it could be something to that degree as well, which I think would make sense. Like, they need to react differently now that a Nimrod is online. So speaking of reacting differently, we see Professor X and Magneto actually go to Moira X, the only time we've seen her in the Hickman X-Men run, and or in specifically in the pages of X-Men. I think technically we see her in X Factor for like a brief moment, and of course she's memorialized in the pages of Marauders. But she's here, Moira's here, and she's reading all the collected works of the Books of Destiny. Some beautiful, beautiful leatherback volumes of the complete works of Irene Adler. This is great. This is very interesting. It's a fantastic use of in-world X-Men artifacts, and obviously given the connections between Moira and Destiny, these, arch nemesis in this version of the Hickman era of X-Men, this means something interesting. Now, what are the Books of Destiny? Okay, the Books of Destiny are Destiny's journals, right? They are her predictions of the future that she started writing when she was 13, okay? When her mutant ability to see the future fully comes into being, she writes the history of the future, of the world, of humanity, of mutant kind, and she puts it all into these diaries, okay? They've been referred to as diaries, books, journals, etc. Same deal. This is basically, she's writing these, and she has these as she gets to know what she calls consulting detective named Raven Darkholm, okay, as they get to know each other and fall in love. And it very much, these diaries, these predictions of what's to come, and these events that they need to stop, this is kind of what radicalizes Mystique, right? In the way that Moira and her visions of the future radicalizes Professor X here in this era of X-Men. It's the same thing for Mystique, but with Destiny, okay? And actually, the ownership of the Books of Destiny has changed hands a number of times throughout X-Men, including Mystique actually giving them to Professor X. And all this detail here in this origin is from the pages of Extreme X-Men, which was kind of Chris Claremont's big return to the X-Men franchise, or one of them, at least in the early 2000s. Now, we've also seen the Books of Destiny referenced in a storyline following the introduction of the Children of the Vault. In the Mike Carey run, it goes Children of the Vault. I think then we go into like Messiah Complex, but then we get a Destiny's Diary focused storyline where it's, I think, like Exodus and a group of his acolytes are basically trying to get their hands on these predictions of the future, and it's an interesting use of these storylines as well. So Moira McTaggart in possession of these and studying them, it cements the interconnected relationship between herself and Destiny, and also what I think will be a growing revelation, perhaps on Moira's part, that she needs Destiny to succeed. Who isn't working together in mutant kind, if you think about it? It's kind of just Moira and Precox. Like, the promise of the Krakoa era is, okay, all mutant kind under, one roof, if you will, on one island, not getting along, at least on the same page, okay? And who's not on the same page? It's Moira saying, no Precox. Don't even allow him. She's the one making a decision to not incorporate all of mutant kind. That could very easily be viewed, potentially, as the wrong choice. So Professor and Magneto, they're devastatingly cold about the possible resurrection of Irene Adler Destiny, which clearly will not happen now, in just brutal fashion to Mystique for, quote-unquote, failing on this mission to destroy Nimrod. Now, what this means is Mystique's options, as I said, they were bring me back for Destiny or burn it all down. And they're not going to bring her back, okay? So what's she going to do? She's going to burn it all down, which is setting up Inferno, the event coming this fall in the X-Line, and pretty clearly what writer Jonathan Hickman will be moving to off of X-Men. The original Inferno was a 1989 event, came out a huge crossover event across all the X titles. It's really, in many ways, the culmination of the Claremont era of X-Men, so much of what 80s X-Men is building to. This is a reference to that, clearly. I think it will play out very differently. I don't know how many clues we can see see from the original, but it's well worth reading if you read that era of X-Men. I do have a good Krakin Krakoa video covering the Inferno event, which we read through not too long ago on the My Marvel This Year podcast as well. Now, I'm probably going to talk about these, kind of clues in this a bit more in the casual Krakoa live conversation later today. But, we see, I think in the visuals here, we see obviously like Professor X and Magneto. We see Mystique, no surprise there. A lot of people have been saying it's Emma Frost, which maybe it is. I kind of wondered if that was Saturnine. I think it's probably Emma, right? Because of the X. But I was kind of, with the hair, I was like, maybe that's Saturnine? Could we get in some otherworld stuff? I think that'd be interesting as well. But probably it's Emma, which is interesting. And then at the very bottom here, I think what we're seeing is an image of Moira and half of a baby. So I think potentially teasing a lifeline reset. So could we be approaching, the 11th life of Moira McTaggart? I think there's a real possibility that Inferno is kind of, it's the Moira Destiny War, I think in a lot of ways, right? And I've talked before about the threat of internal mutant struggle, and that's what Mystique is going to bring, right? Like Mystique is going to bring, hey, what if one of our own, what if one of the mutants, a council member no less, decides to burn it all down? What mutants will she be able to get on her side? Think about like a Legion, for example, someone who would be in a similar boat of them not resurrecting blindfold, and also just having no love lost, frankly, for his world's worst dad, Professor X and Magneto, who he doesn't trust at all. Will Inferno ultimately end with Moira realizing, okay, the only way this is going to work, the only way I get an 11th life, Destiny predicted, is if I make the right call in the end. And is the right call to actually resurrect Destiny, to welcome in all of mutant kind, to make them aware of my plans, to not be so secretive, right? And potentially to find a new way forward in the 11th life. Could that be the outcome of Inferno? I think there's a very strong possibility that is what is being teased here. So, the Krakoan for X-Men number 21, which again will be the final issue of Hickman's run, on this particular title, that will be coming out next month. It'll be part of the Hellfire Gala, which I'm still excited about, but feels so trivial in comparison to everything that got dropped in this issue. I mean, this was great. X-Men number 20 was so excellent at paying off and tying back to so much of what we've seen through this exciting era of X-Men. It was probably, again, like I've been saying this a bunch lately, but one of the most exciting issues that I've read in this era, if not the most exciting in terms of just what it means, about what it's building towards, all of these things that we've kind of been waiting on seeing happen, coming to the forefront, which is great. So let me know what you think about it all. Let me know in the comments, in your theories, what you think about the issue, what you think it's going. Were you as bothered by Mystique's strategic failings as I sort of was? Things like that, I would definitely love to hear. I think likewise, if you're listening to this day of May 26th, when this issue came out, I will be doing a casual Krakoa live here on the channel. So look for that in the evening as well. I'll talk a little bit more about theories for Inferno and New Mutants number 17, which came out today as well. Thanks to everybody who supports Comic Book Herald over on patreon.com/Comic Book Herald. Your support is greatly appreciated and helps me keep going. Again, you can find my stuff at comicbookherald.com, at Comic Book Herald on social. Look for the best comics ever in My Marvelous Year podcast for more from me. Thanks everybody for listening, and as always, enjoy the comics.